This is a super versatile Sony 18-105 F4 G OSS. It's the lens that I use the most for my Sony E-mount system, and in this video I will tell you why, I will tell you what I like about it, I will tell you what I don't like about it, I will tell you who I believe this lens is for. This video is long and covers many aspects in detail, so I will put some timestamps in the descriptions. But if you are curious about this lens or planning to buy it, I definitely recommend you to watch the whole video. At the end of the video I will also summarize my impressions and experience with this lens, and also reason a bit about who this lens is for. So for the absolute beginners I will start with the naming convention, and its full name is Sony E PZ 18-105 F4 G OSS, and the E is for the E-mount system and the PZ is for power zoom. 18-105 is obviously for the focal length, it's from 18-105, and F4 is for the aperture, which is a constant F4. G is for the product line, which could be considered Sony's mid-range lenses. So the G series lenses are not entry-level lenses, and they are not professional lenses either, so they are for advanced amateurs or enthusiasts, or what you could refer to as prosumers. And the OSS is for the optical image stabilization. So first off, let's talk about the build quality, and since it's a G lens, it's a much better build quality than the kit lens. The barrel is hefty, it has a metal shell, but is mostly built of plastic. It feels like a quality product and it's very solid. One important thing to mention is that the lens mount has no weather sealing gasket, and since this lens is electronically controlled, I recommend that you leave it at home at rainy days. If you are familiar with the Canon full frame lenses, this lens reminds me a bit of the Canon 24-105 F4L when it comes to both size and build quality. Or if you are familiar with soft drinks or other drinks, it's about the same size as a 33 centiliter can. It has a 72mm filter diameter, and it's about the same weight as a Sony 6400. All in all, this is a somewhat large lens, and if you have chosen the Sony E-mount system because you like the small size, you should really consider the size of this lens. The focal length is 18-105, which is equivalent to 27-157.5. I wouldn't say that the focal length or the zoom range is unique for this lens, but it's at least remarkable, and I would say that it's mainly the zoom range that makes this lens so versatile. It's not just that it's a 6x zoom, it's rather that it covers 3 different characteristics of a lens. This lens is a wide-angle lens, it's a normal lens, and it's a telephoto lens, or at least a short telephoto lens. So even if there are other lenses that covers a wider zoom range in absolute numbers, like a 100-400 telephoto lens, it still only has one characteristic, like it's still just a telephoto lens, and you can change your composition and the framing of your photo, and you can come closer to a subject, but you really don't change the characteristic of the lens. But with this lens you can really get totally different photos. You can cover a whole room, or you can focus on small details. And to give you an idea the difference of a wide angle, a normal and a short telephoto lens, I will show you 3 photos that I have taken from the exact same spot. The zoom is motorized, and that's what Sony refers to as a power zoom. It has both a button and a ring, but they both control the motor, so it's only maneuvered by wire. There is no manual zoom that mechanically directly controls the zoom, so I don't feel like I get the same control as when I use it manually or mechanically. The motorized zoom has 3 different speeds. This is the slowest, very consistent speed. Look at this, this is so smooth and so consistent. I would never get this smooth motion when zooming if I was doing this manually. This is a bit faster. So for videography, the motorized zoom will really help you capture better and more professional looking footage. I didn't find the power zoom quite as great for photography though. A manual zoom is generally much faster and more accurate. So in still image photography, when a zooming motion, a consistent zooming motion isn't as important as speed and responsiveness and accuracy, I would actually prefer a mechanical manual zoom. The zoom is totally internal, so it doesn't extend the barrel when you are zooming. This makes it a perfect lens for using with a gimbal, because you don't need to rebalance your gimbal every time you have changed the zoom or the focus. The aperture is a constant f4, and I really like that it's constant, because for video, if you are zooming in and out, you won't change the exposure of your footage. So this is a great lens for video. F4 is not super fast, so it's not great for low light situations, or if it's very important for you to have a short depth of field if you want to isolate a model from the background. But I have used this lens a lot for portraits, and I actually think that maybe f1.8 could be a little bit too shallow, because you don't really, if you focus on a person's eyes, you don't really get those other details like skin details and all that. So normally I actually use about f4 anyway when I take portraits, if I don't really want this short depth of field effect. This is a 7-blade aperture, so it's not totally round, but it's still very good looking. I'd say it's creamy at f4 and when you have zoomed into 105. But since it's not totally round, I have other lenses that are creamier. But I wouldn't say that this lens is stressful in the bokeh or so, and it's actually quite good looking. It's just that I have some other lenses that are better. The autofocus on this lens is really fast, which is common for native Sony lenses. I use it a lot with my Sony A6400, and they make a really good job together, and I can really recommend that combo if you want a really fast autofocus. It doesn't hunt a lot, and it's very accurate and very fast. And there is very little focus breathing, so you won't really change the composition if you are changing the focal distance in your scene. The focusing distance is not very good on this lens, though. It has the closest range of 45 centimeters, which is about 1.5 foot at the widest, and it's about 90 centimeters on the telephoto side, and that's about 3 feet or something like that. Image quality. As you know, a zoom with a very wide zoom range normally have a trade-off in image quality. And of course this lens is not as good as prime lenses, but it's better than the kit lens, and I would still say that it's surprisingly good quality given how versatile this lens is. It gives you very good images even at the Aperture 4, but at Aperture 8 I would say they are even better, depending on focal length and focal distance, etc. But in general it is a very good image quality. This lens is very sharp for being a zoom. Again, I have primes that are sharper, but I wouldn't say that's a fair comparison. You can see some minor imperfections if you are pixel peeping 24 megapixel images, but the sharpness has never been a problem for me. Here is a selfie that I took, and when I'm looking at it in full size, I can state that the image is very sharp. There is a small amount of distortion. It's very easy to compensate for this in Lightroom when you are taking still images, but you should consider this if you are shooting video. And speaking of video, I would say this lens is great for video. It has a constant aperture 4, which is great when you are zooming in and out and don't want to change exposure. The motors in the lens are very silent, and normally I use it with a lavalier microphone or an external microphone, but even when I have used the internal microphone I haven't really had any problems with the lens making any noises or such things that the microphone is picking up. 18mm is wide enough for vlogging, at least for me. I know many vloggers are buying the 10 to 18 f4, and I guess it kind of depends on what kind of footage you are shooting, on what kind of style you want your footage to look like. But for me, who is normally just talking to the camera and don't need to show so much of the environment, it's definitely good enough to show my face and talk to the camera. So I would really say this is a lens that is useful for vlogging. It also has built-in image stabilization, which is very good for me, who owns the A6400 that doesn't have built-in image stabilization. For photography, this is a lens that I have most of the time on my Sony cameras, and I carry it with me because I don't know really what to take photos of. I can use it to take a selfie or to take everyday photos of my family, or I know a lot of people are taking photos of food, and you can also take portraits, and you can take some action photos like sport photos, but it's not a very long telephoto lens and it's not super fast. But I guess you already know that if you want a faster and longer lens, it will be a lot more expensive. That would be maybe the 7200 f2.8, which is many times more expensive than this lens. All in all, this is a very good lens for photography and I use it a lot. Alright, so to summarize my thoughts on this lens is that it's a very versatile lens that you can use for almost anything. It has a very fast autofocus, and it also has an internal focus, so you can use it easily with a gimbal. And what I don't like about this lens is that the F4 is not super fast, but it's still a very useful aperture that you can take great photos with, and you can also get a pretty short depth of field if you use it at 105mm. I also wish that this lens was rather sealed and that it had a little closer focus distance. So who is this lens made for? It's perfect for a hybrid shooter like myself, who's shooting both photos and video. For video, you will probably appreciate the motorized zoom and the constant aperture f4, and if you are using a gimbal, you will appreciate the internal focusing. It's also great for people who likes traveling, because even if it's a bit bulky, it's also very well rounded. So for many people, you only need to bring one lens. I recommend this lens if you are on a budget and you shoot many different kind of subjects. If I know that I will shoot a whole session of portraits only, I will probably bring a prime lens for portraits. But if I just grab my camera and leave my house, This lens assures me that I am well prepared for any photo opportunity that I might stumble upon. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions regarding this lens. From Sweden with love, thanks for watching.